Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Let's Eat. I gave myself permission to be comfy today because it's Sunday, and shame on me for working on a Sunday. I just have a busy week ahead, so I said, all right, let me get some things done today. One of which being recording an episode for this week. And I'm in my comfies, and we are cross-legged in my chair. I have some tea with me. Today's herbal tea blend is nettle leaf tea, and it's called Peppermint Probiotic Delight. It's by Traditional Medicinals. I think it is peppermint tea, maybe lemon balm tea, which is wonderful for your nervous system, for anxiety, for your digestion. And I think there's a strain of probiotic in the tea itself. So I've just been doing a blend of these. I don't know why I'm combining them, but it works. And then I also have a smoothie with me. So I want to dive into today's episode because this topic is so valuable, not just in health and wellness, but just in general. I think this topic is something that we should all understand better because it really is the foundation of behavior and action and creating change in our lives. And so by understanding habit formation, and what exactly that means, you can take the framework, you can take the approach and apply it in any situation in your life. Now, for today's episode, of course, we're going to be talking more specifically about health and wellness. I might pull some examples that are just general examples that help to conceptualize the concepts. I just said conceptualize the concepts. To conceptualize the framework, that would be so wrong of me to say conceptualize the concepts. To conceptualize the framework a bit and give more of like a tangible example. But really understanding this and then applying it to your own life and looking at your own habits and your own experience. And really what I hope you take away from this is an understanding of what habits are supporting my health and what habits are detrimental to my health. And from this assessment, you can then decide, okay, how might I approach or address these habits in a more effective, more intentional way so that they can be less influential on my health, on my wellness, on my productivity, on fill in the blank, whatever it is that you're looking to work on. Okay. So let's start off with some quotes that I think would be really helpful to set the scene a little bit. Okay. I love this one and I've shared it on Instagram a number of times. So this one in particular, I think is really powerful, and I'm going to break it down a little bit. So new goals don't deliver new results. New lifestyles do. And a lifestyle is a process, not an outcome. For this reason, all of your energy should go into building better habits, not chasing better results. Okay, so new goals don't deliver new results. New lifestyles do. And a lifestyle is a process, not an outcome. Okay, outcome is the goal. For this reason, all your energy should go into building better habits, not chasing better results. So the difference here is you can have a goal. I have goals. I'm sure you have goals. I have lots of goals. We can all have goals, right? But the goal themselves is not going to bring about the result, right? The goal is just the goal. The goal is the destination. It's the journey. It's the process. It's the day-to-day, the action steps, the unfolding of the habits that are going to get you to said goal. So really, as the quote states, for this reason, all of your energy should go into building better habits, not chasing better results, right? What are the small habits? What are the micro movements that you can take that contribute to your larger goal, that contribute to the result you're looking for? Because that will then create momentum and energy towards your goal, as opposed to just chasing a goal, chasing the result. You're breaking it down into the process by which you will get there. Okay? Another quote, and I reference James Clear a lot because he wrote the book Atomic Habits, which you can see right here. Highly recommend. I'm going to link that book in the show notes because it's one of the, I think, most well-known books about habits. And it's a really, really valuable one. I read it through at the beginning of this year just because I wanted that like re-inspiration. And once again, I was like, this is such a good book. Such a good book. It's such an easy read, but it's a concept that's just so powerful. So 10 out of 10 recommend. So according to James Clear, it is so easy to overestimate the importance of one defining moment and underestimate the value of making small improvements on a daily basis. Too often, we convince ourselves that massive success requires massive action. Success is the product of daily habits, not once-in-a-lifetime transformation. So this kind of echoes what I had just said, right? That, you know, we have this idea, we have this illusion, essentially, that change or achievement or healing comes from one defining moment, right? That it's an overnight shift, it's an overnight change. And at the same time, I think it's also this narrative that we believe that massive success requires massive action, right? That, you know, in order to be really successful, in order to be, you know, really high achieving, you have to take these bold, these massive steps in order to get that. Yeah, in some cases that can be, you know, that can be true, right? And I think that there are larger actions to be taken and maybe smaller ones. But I think really what's most important are those micro movements, as I mentioned, those daily routines that are actually going to add up to an eventual transformation, right? It's reinforcement of that 1%. I always talk about how important it is to at least invest 1%. Invest 1% in your health. Invest 1% in your new hobby, in your business, in whatever the case is. And that's where you'll see the transition. That's where you'll see the change and the evolution. Okay? And one paper published by a Duke University researcher in 2006 found that more than 40% of what we perform each day weren't decisions, but habits. This is huge too, because we are always trying to conserve energy, right? Our brain is always looking to consolidate, to, you know, compartmentalize, to, I don't know, operate on autopilot, right? It's easier for us to operate on autopilot, especially when a lot of the things we do are really repetitive, right? Are things that we do over and over and over again. So much of what we do on a day-to-day basis is just habit. And it's until we really look under a microscope can we recognize, how is this habit serving me, or how is this habit detracting from me feeling good, from my health, and fill in the blank, right? Like whatever relevant situation is applicable for you here, you can really decide, how is this habit serving me? How is this habit contributing to my ultimate goal? Because it's through those daily habits, those daily routines, that we don't even realize things are happening the way that they're happening, right? And it's just day to day, we kind of move through the monotony of these maybe micro movements that actually have a big impact. And I'll showcase some of them as we move through the episode. But what it really takes is awareness. And I talk about this all the time, but awareness is the key to transformation. And so if we want to really make a difference in what our daily habits look like, we have to first know that they're happening, right? If we want to make a change, if we want to improve our health, if we want to, adjust the way that we're living, we have to first be aware of how we're living. We have to first be aware of the habits. We have to first be aware of what is happening and then understand what to do next. Okay, and we'll talk about that. This brings into the conversation a little bit neuroplasticity, which is the field of research that basically says our brains are plastic. Up until, I don't even know when, several years ago, it was this belief that our brains fully developed and they couldn't be changed. But now we've learned that our brains are malleable. Our brains actually can be rewired and remolded to some extent. And the circuitry can be pruned. Okay, so as in we can pull away from that neural pathway that maybe has been reinforced. And then we can also strengthen new neural pathways. And I worked on this a lot when I was working as a therapist, because a lot of thoughts that we have are repetitive thoughts. I think it's like 90% of our thoughts are repetitive, 80% of them are negative. So similarly, right, this obviously brings it down to a seriously granular level, but a lot of the thought processes we have are inherently habitual. And our thoughts create our reality. And our thoughts create how we feel. And our thoughts dictate our actions. So if we're really trying to get on a micro level here, right, and really bring it down, we can talk about how our thoughts create emotion and then subsequent behavior, right? If we were triggered in any potential way, right, that might drive us to engage in a certain habit as a result of that. And from that can perpetuate a habit cycle that maybe is not supportive of our goals or is not in alignment with the way we want to feel and so forth. Okay, so we could really go down a rabbit hole here and look at all of these kind of, stages essentially in behavior and habits and so forth. And I'll be able to maybe tie that in as we move through the episode. But I want to first break down the habit loop that science reflects as being what a habit actually is, okay? Because once you understand this, you can really take this framework, as I mentioned before, and apply it to your day-to-day, apply it to what you have going on, and really understand a little bit better, okay, where do I need to interject, right? Like, what area can I focus on to make a different choice, right? To create a different outcome. So, we first start with a cue, okay? And this is a trigger that tells your brain to go into automatic mode and what habit to use in that space, okay? So cue, just like it sounds, right? It cues us to do something, okay? I'll pull up an example just so that I have that to share with you all. Okay, so use this example. We'll say your phone buzzes with a new text. Right? So that's the cue. And then we'll talk more as we move through this cycle so that you understand and you can kind of visualize it and how that, is relevant based on the description of the part of the cycle and then the example. But the cue is your phone buzzes with a new text. So keep that example in mind. Then we can talk about the routine. And this can be physical, mental, or emotional, right? The routine itself is the habit. Okay, this is important. The routine is the habit. So the cue prompts the routine. The cue prompts the routine. The cue prompts the habit. Okay? Then we can talk about the reward. And this helps your brain to decide, is this particular habit worth remembering for the future? Okay? It also satisfies what we know as a craving, okay? And this is kind of like a fourth component to this loop. And this comes usually after the cue. Okay, so we'll go back to our example. The cue is your phone buzzes with a new text message, okay? The craving, you want to learn. What does this message say? And I would even argue, okay, I think just given the nature of our phones and how addictive they are, I think any notification that comes up, okay, prompts our curiosity, right? Which obviously, yeah, like if I have something come up on my phone, if I see, I'm looking down because my phone is on my legs, because when I keep it on my desk, it vibrates and I can hear it in the audio. But anyways, when we are, aware that our phone is buzzing or a notification comes up, obviously there's curiosity, and I think we've kind of been conditioned to immediately check, whether it's the sound, the alert, the buzz, whatever it is, to see what's going on. But that's the craving that comes along with that cue, okay? The response is you grab your phone and read the text, okay? And the reward of that is you satisfy the craving to read the message. So the reward satisfies the craving, okay? And the example furthers and says, grabbing your phone becomes associated with your phone buzzing. Think about it. How often, our phone buzzes, or even someone else's phone buzzes, okay? And we're immediately, prompted to either go reach for it, to look at it, right? And that's largely a part of this habit loop, okay? Another example, all right? The cue. You wake up, okay? You wake up. And, this could even keep this example going with the phone, and I can say you reach for your phone, right? That's like the craving. You want to see what's on your phone. All right, but instead, let's use this example. I'm pulling these directly off of James Clear's website to really articulate this concept. So you wake up and you want to feel alert. The response to that is you have yourself a coffee, you have yourself a matcha, okay? You are satisfying your craving to feel alert. Now, we could argue, right, that for this particular example, a lot of times we're operating in this more placebo experience because it's just a habit, right? Where you wake up, and because you associate waking up or this craving to feel alert with drinking a cup of coffee, you could go have yourself a cup of decaf, you could have yourself whatever you wanted to, and possibly, right, still have that same experience, because sometimes it really is just that habit that is generating that reward, right? And we'll talk more about this, and it's about replacing the habit with something that's a little bit more maybe healthful or productive or more in alignment with what you're looking to achieve, but generating that same reward, okay? But it's interesting, right? Because you could think, well, I need my caffeine, I need my coffee to feel awake, feel alert. But if you put your cup of decaf in that response instead, see what kind of experience that brings for you, right? Or maybe even just a half calf of coffee, right? It doesn't have to be so extreme. But I'm just using this as an example, right? Because we can see how that might be in actuality just a habit that exists. And it's not actually the caffeine that's bringing you alertness. It's more of the experience or the kind of that anticipation of it that is prompting that reward. Okay, that makes sense. Another cue. You smell a donut shop as you walk down the street near your office. Okay, the craving is you begin to crave a donut. The response, you buy a donut and eat it. You satisfy your craving to eat a donut. Buying a donut becomes associated with walking down the street near your office. Okay, because if you're walking down the street and you continue to engage in this cycle, I hear this all the time, right? About being down the shore and wanting an ice cream cone, or driving by the fast food joint, right? And always ending up in the drive-thru. Now that could also be for a number of other reasons, right? But, these kind of experiences that just become habitual for us by association and reinforcement of the habit that make it a little bit more challenging to step away from it. Okay? So when we talk about, like I said, we have the cue, and the cues can be anything. It could be an object, it could be a certain place, a time of day, right? Say 5 o'clock hits and immediately that's prompting you to pour a glass of wine, right? It can be an emotion. It can be a sequence of thoughts. Like I said before, our thoughts create emotions, create behavior. A lot of times when it comes to emotion, we reach for comfort through food. As a therapist, I worked in an internship site that really focused on eating disorder work, and I've shared on this a number of times. And, when difficult emotions presented themselves, that would often prompt disordered eating behavior. In some cases, it would prompt self-harm. Some cases for people, it prompts using, right? Alcohol, drugs. Some cases, it prompts gambling. So, this can vary, obviously, on certain extremes, but I think the most relevant, maybe the most common issue I see is I'm stressed out, so I'm going to eat, right? And that really, in and of itself, is while it's a maladaptive coping skill, it's also very habitual, right? And that's where people get stuck in that cycle, is because we have this habit of, well, when I'm feeling stressed, this is what I know best, right? This is what I know is going to bring me relief. Do we really know that it's bringing us relief? No, not so much. I don't think that it's actually bringing us any legitimate relief. But we do have this illusion because in the past, we've reinforced that reward, and now our brain habitually engages in that loop. Okay? So we have our cue, we have our routine and craving, and we have the reward. Okay? So I want to read this from James Clear's website because I think it does a really great job at articulating how all of those components are necessary to create a habit, right? So, if a behavior is insufficient in any of the 4 stages, it will not become a habit. Eliminate the cue and your habit will never start. Reduce the craving and you won't experience enough motivation to act. Make the behavior difficult and you won't be able to do it. And if the reward fails to satisfy your desire, then you'll have no reason to do it again in the future. Without the first 3 steps, a behavior will not occur. Without all 4, a behavior will not be repeated. Okay? So in summary, the cue triggers a craving, which motivates a response, which provides a reward, which satisfies the craving, and ultimately becomes associated with the cue. Okay, did we follow that? The cue triggers the craving, which motivates a response, which provides a reward, which satisfies the craving and becomes associated with the cue. So you are essentially engaging in a behavior to satisfy a desire, a craving. That generates a reward, which then tells us and our brains, this is a behavior I want to repeat. And then that cycle continues. Okay, so I will loosely return to this cycle as I move through this episode, but I also want to pull in examples that are relevant to client work that I've done, and then also my own personal experience, right, to really kind of showcase habits in relation to wellness, okay, and talk about how foundational they are. Something I wanted to mention too, this is a statistic from one of the books that I was reading, which I will also link in the show notes. When researchers affiliated with the National Weight Control Registry, a project involving more than 6,000 people who have lost more than 30 pounds, looked at the habits of successful dieters, they found that 78% of them ate breakfast every morning, a meal cued by a time of day. But most of the successful dieters also envisioned a specific reward for sticking with their diet. A bikini they wanted to wear, or the sense of pride they felt when they stepped on the scale each day. Something they chose carefully and really wanted. They focused on the craving for that reward when temptations arose, cultivated the craving into a mild obsession. And their cravings for that reward, researchers found, crowded out the temptation to drop the diet. The craving drove the habit loop. Okay? So this is something I do a lot with clients, and it's really about envisioning their why. Okay? Because that can essentially be, the same as a craving, right? Is revisiting your why, giving yourself that reminder when you are engaging in a cue or the routine, whatever the case is, as to why you are doing it, right? Because you want to feel a certain way, you want to look a certain way, you want your health to be in a certain spot, right? And reinforcement of that why is really part of satisfying that craving, right? Because you want something. You want to feel better. You want to, be a healthy mom. You want to fill in the blank, right? So a lot of times it takes that additional, if not all the time, right? Because as we know, we need all of those components in order to really create this loop successfully. Identifying your why and understanding, okay, this is the reason why I am driven to engage in this behavior. Because what do we know to be true? We know it's the micro habits. It's not one massive change that's going to create the results. So while the results might be on the other side and the craving for those results are bigger picture, right? It's those micro movements that are contributing to that. And that's where that craving is, right? For me, for example, my decision to work out, right? The craving that I find most relevant to my decision to work out is I want to feel more energy and I want to have a better mood, right? Because mental health and movement, don't get me started, okay? So that really incentivizes me because I know the reward on the other side of my workout is mental clarity, stabilized mood, better energy, right? All of these wonderful things, but it's just about engaging in the routine. And it's also about, is my craving strong enough for those things, right? And that's really important. Because if the craving is kind of just like, I don't know, it's kind of like, when doctors have to give maybe a more, I don't know, serious diagnosis of some kind, right? Patients are more likely to act on those things versus, someone saying, oh, maybe you should lose a couple pounds, but you're fine, right? Like the energy and the experience is so different. And it takes a lot of times, rock bottom in order to actually make some sort of change in one's life. Now, I won't get into that too much, but what it boils down to is if we don't want it enough, if there's no real immediate risk or we can't really conceptualize the risk or the concern or whatever the case is, it's just not going to be as motivating for us, right? It's just not going to be as incentivizing. I can't tell you how many times people come to me, for help and they're at a point where like something has to change, right? Like I can't go on this way. Rarely are people coming to me with, kind of this subpar motivation of just like, yeah, nothing's really going on, but I thought I'd just call you. It's just not, that's not the case. Like people are motivated to make change when it's, when the stakes are high, right? I completely understand. That's a very human thing, right? So that craving needs to be strong enough and that reward needs to reinforce the behavior enough in order for the routine to maintain and sustain, right? And so for this example, all about weight loss, some of them envisioned, the bikini that they wanted to wear, right? Some of them imagined what it would feel like to stand on the scale and look at the number, right? And see that they've lost weight and how good that will feel and how good that does feel, right? I mean, that's also just a big part of visualization, right? It's just to imagine yourself doing all the things that maybe you dreamt of or that your goals look like, or being in that space and time that the goals have been achieved. And that's a really powerful manifestation technique, but I won't get into that once again. See, all of these kind of ideas are coming to me about other episodes that I could add to the list. But this is a really important concept for us to understand in relation to our wellness, right? Not just weight loss, but just in general. Because that habit loop determines, over time, all of these outcomes. And once we start to familiarize ourselves with those specific habits, we can make a change. Okay? So to change a habit, this is what James Clear says, you must keep the old cue and deliver the old reward, but insert a new routine, right? You don't want to break a habit. That doesn't exist. You can't extinguish them. That's what the one author mentioned. I forget what his name is, but I'll link his book. And I think it's Charles something. I'll link it in the show notes. So what are you choosing to do instead of the routine, right? And this is, we could go to an example like quitting smoking. Right? I'm not a smoker. I've never had a cigarette in my life. I don't know the experience of it. So I can't really speak on it confidently. But I think this is a good example. right? Maybe the cue is I'm stressed out. Okay. Maybe the craving is I'd like a cigarette. And the routine is smoking a cigarette. And the reward is I feel stress relief, right? So instead, cue, stressed out. Craving, I want a cigarette. Routine, what are we putting there instead? Are we going for a walk? Are we having some, I'm trying to think of what is it called? The gum that you chew? You know what I'm talking about. The gum that you're supposed to chew instead. I heard sunflower seeds. Someone told me that sunflower seeds is a good replacement. Okay. Are we going for a run? Are we taking a few deep breaths, right? Like, what are we replacing that behavior with that's going to generate the same reward? All right. That is huge because that is so specific to you. It is so specific to you because the reward that's generated from smoking a cigarette might not be the same as the reward for someone else. And so you really have to look at your own circumstances and decide, okay, what would be the suitable replacement here? And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, right? It's not going to be an easy, switch. It might take time to really figure out what works, but that's really the goal, is to understand when the cue is present, not to resist and fight against the cue and hold back as hard as you can, right? It's really about replacing it with something that's a little bit more healthful or a little bit more in alignment with the goals that you have for yourself and generating the same or a similar reward on the other side, which then quells that routine that has been habitual for you for however long. Okay? So the framework that the one author suggests should be implemented is identify the routine. Okay, so you want to look at, okay, what's the cue, what's the craving, what's the reward, and what's the routine? The cue, the craving, the routine, and the reward. All right? You want to first isolate that so you can understand what is the progression of this happen. And this is going down on like a micro granular level. You want to look at that with the very specifics of it all, because the more specific you can get, the more intentional you can be about making a change, right? And doing something different. All right? Then you want to experiment with rewards. Okay? Experiment with alternatives. Experiment with different things that you could try in lieu of the original habit that you're trying to eradicate or change. Is a better word there. Okay? Then you want to isolate the cue. Okay? You want location, time, emotional state. Are there other people involved? Immediate preceding action. Okay? So what usually takes place prior to that cue? Like, I have a daily call with my boss at 4:30. And at 5 o'clock, when I get off the phone, all I want is to go open the fridge and have myself a pint of ice cream, right? And that call, or maybe the time between I hang up the call and I decide what to do next, or maybe the emotion I feel as a result of the call is what prompts me to go into the freezer and get the ice cream. Okay? So can you see how breaking it down will really help you better understand the process? And then from there, you want to have a plan. Okay, from there, you'll be able to better determine what is the craving here? What is it that I'm looking for? Why am I emotional? What emotion am I feeling as a result of talking to my boss, right? What emotion am I feeling? Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it frustration? Is it guilt? Is it shame, right? Like, there's so many different emotions that you could input there. But I think understanding that emotion will then allow you to understand, what is it that my body needs right now? What is it that my body needs to extinguish and release as a result of talking to my boss, which is something I honestly can't get out of, right? I have to talk to my boss, okay? So this is so valuable to understand how this can be used in your wellness, okay? Those were just a couple examples. I feel like they, were teetering on wellness related. But I think that when you really think about your own life and you think about what you do from day to day or areas maybe that you struggle, this is a question I ask clients all the time. It's, what were areas that you struggled with? What areas were challenging for you this week, right? And sometimes it is this, habit that just keeps resurfacing and keeps reappearing. And it's about bringing our attention to those habits to then decide, how can I address them so that I have a more productive outcome and I stop reinforcing this routine that can sometimes be unhealthy, can sometimes be toxic, right? But I can reinforce a more productive, more adaptive, more, healthful routine or habit with a reward on the other side that generates that same experience for me. Okay? So I want to talk about James Clear's 4 laws of behavior change. I think that this is really relevant, and then I'll talk a little bit about client work and so forth. So first, you want to make your intended habit obvious. Okay? So when I say that, the immediate thought that comes to mind, and I think this is like such a simple hack, but it's actually pretty effective, is lay out your gym clothes. I think about like on the first day of school, I, would lay out my clothes. Now that wasn't to reinforce a habit. It was just me being a weirdo and loving the first day of school, right? But lay out your gym clothes. Even sleep in your gym clothes. Okay? Sleep in your gym clothes. Or fill your fridge with real whole foods. Make it obvious. Like so obvious. How many times do we put things like dead center on our counter just to be sure that we remember them, right? Or we put Post-its places to remind ourselves of like, oh, remember to defrost the chicken, right? I don't know. Make it as obvious as you can, whatever that looks like for you. Okay, I think laying out your gym clothes is a good example. Fill your fridge with healthful foods. I mean, if you open the fridge and you're like, what should I eat? And there's only real whole foods staring at you, I think that's pretty obvious. Well, what we should be eating. Okay? Oh my goodness, excuse me. So, make it attractive, all right? Pair an action you want to do with an action that you need to do, all right? Watch Netflix while walking on your walking pad. Listen to your new book while preparing a healthy meal. Or do something you enjoy immediately before a difficult habit. Research shows that I think it has something to do with like the dopamine release or the serotonin release, right? This will create a positive association with the new habit. I'm trying to think. I had an example for this and relevant to my life, and I forget what it was, and it's gonna bother me because I really want to remember it. Maybe it'll come back to me. But I had an example. I was like, oh, this is such a good example of this because I've done this before, right? So either you want to make it attractive by either, I guess another example of this would be, doing a workout class that you enjoy, right? Is that attractive to you? Like any class that's advertised as hot, I'm in. Say no more. I'm in. I've been taking hot Pilates. I'm working on my Pilates certification, right? Like there's a lot of things happening in the world of Pilates, but the classes that I take predominantly are hot classes, and that I'm sold. I am sold. Don't ask me again. I'm going. Okay. Whereas like a normal yoga class, and I'll say yoga because Pilates I do enjoy now. Yoga, I don't have as much of a passion for it. A regular yoga class, all right. Hot yoga, I'm there. Sign me up, okay? So that's making it attractive, right? But there's a number of ways to look at this. I think also pairing something that you want to do with something you need to do, okay? Watch Netflix while walking on your walking pad. I'm considering getting a walking pad come the fall and the winter just so I can continue to do my walks like I have been doing without having to go outside. Now, that obviously puts Lou in a loss, right? Because she won't get to be able to walk with me as long as we do now. But I love to be able to pair it with doing something else, answering emails while I'm on, the walking pad. practicing positive affirmations while I'm brushing my teeth. I do my red light mask while I'm meditating. Meditation, I don't want to say it's not an attractive habit for me, but it's not something that I've easily been able to incorporate. But I love using my red light mask. So doing that together just helps to maybe incentivize me a little, and that's habit stacking, which I'll touch on a little bit too. But make it attractive, okay? The last example, like I said, you could do something you enjoy before that will then prompt you to do the habit that maybe you're not feeling so hot about, okay? Make it easy. Make it easy. I feel like I don't need to say this, but I should say it because it's so obvious that we just need to make it easy. Start small. Meet yourself where you are and take an inch, all right? As humans, we cling to convenience and we are wired this way. So if you make the habit easy, compounding over time, reinforcing it over time will result in a routine, right? That's what we're looking for. We're looking for this habit to become routine. So if you look at a habit that you're trying to incorporate with this framework in mind, considering the cue, the craving, the habit itself, and the reward, and repeat it, but you also honor the fact that you are where you are when you start, that is the best way to be successful here. All right? The example that was given is to create an environment where the habit is most accessible. Okay? So join a group of runners if you want to start running. Right? Join, a cooking class if you want to start to make more home-cooked meals. Right? Reduce the friction associated with the habit. Okay? Reduce the friction. The example I always give is there's this beautiful gym. It's a Lifetime Fitness, which I think is a nationwide gym, I'm pretty sure. Or at least I know they have multiple locations. And I drive by it. It's probably like 45 minutes from me. And I drive by it and it's beautiful, right? I mean, they've got all the amenities. It's beautiful. It's obviously like a luxury type of gym. And I think about it. I'm like, if somebody said to me, okay, Emily, you can only go to this gym now, right? I wouldn't be sad, but to drive 45 minutes for the frequency of which I work out, that's not going to happen. So you saying, I am joining a gym that's 45 minutes outside of my drive home from work, right? Versus I'm joining a gym that's literally a mile from my house, or I pass it on the ride home. That's making it easy, okay? Making it so challenging and creating all this friction around it is not the way to go about creating a behavior change or making a new habit, okay? And then lastly, make it satisfying. So this is where that reward plays in. Give yourself a reward. Celebrate every time you accomplish the goal. Or not the goal necessarily, I guess the habit that contributes to the goal, right? Give yourself a reward. We're just as, reinforced by rewards as our toddlers, as our adolescents, right? Where, you're getting gold stars or you're getting an allowance or whatever it is, right? Give yourself that same reward and make it something that you enjoy. Make it something that's actually incentivizing to you, right? Because it's not going to be like, oh, you worked out? Okay, congratulations. You get to eat a salad. For some, that might be rewarding. I know for me, that's not rewarding. Okay, like that would not incentivize me. I love salads, don't get me wrong, but to incentivize that as a reward for a workout, not it. If you said every time you work out, you put $5 in a jar and that goes towards your next facial, heck yeah, I'm working out 6 times today, right? No, I would never do that, nor do I advise that, okay? Never, ever, ever. But you get the point, okay? You have to make it satisfying. I know for me, working out, the reward of how I feel on the other side is reward and is incentive and satisfying in and of itself. And so that is a given. That might not be for everyone. It might be really uncomfortable. It might not feel good, right? But creating something on the other side that works for you, that's what's most important, okay? So I think about this one client, and this is a client I worked with maybe a year and a half ago, and she was dealing with pretty significant weight issues. She was very sedentary. Her job was sedentary, very sedentary, just generally speaking. And working up the, I don't want to say motivation necessarily, but working up the decision or the choice, right, to get moving was a big topic of conversation for us, right? So what we did to get started with this behavior change concept in mind, with the habits and so forth, right? Because it's not like we were deconstructing necessarily a poor habit. We could argue coming home from work, the habit that caused her to not exercise, right? Maybe it was, I just sit on the couch, the opportunity presents itself. I'm home from work. That's the cue. And I can choose to go work out, or I can choose to go sit on the couch. More often than not, the choice was to go sit on the couch. That's not to say that it was every night, right? But maybe it was to go into the kitchen, or maybe it was to call a friend, or whatever it is, right? So our goal was really just to get the habit and get the repetition of movement started. And that can start on such a micro level. So for this particular client, her stationary bike was in her basement. Now, looking back, I think one of the probably better options we could have considered is moving the stationary bike to the main level, make it obvious, make it accessible, make it easy, right? Maybe in front of the TV where she could just sit and pedal and watch TV, so make it attractive, okay? But for the sake of this example, what we just started to have her do is waking up for the whole week and just putting on her exercise clothes, which we could have stopped there just for that week, right? And then she could have gotten dressed. But instead, what we did was we had her put on her exercise clothes and just go downstairs, right? Just go stand near the stationary bike for 5 minutes, or do some light stretching for 5 minutes, right? And then the following week, it was get on the stationary bike, and then we started to build, all right? We built that habit. We expanded that. And a lot of it was just, okay, the cue was my workout clothes are laid out, or the cue was I'm waking up, or the cue was, it's 5 o'clock and I'm home from work, right? I forget exactly what time of day we chose to do it, but just as examples, right? And we used a lot of her why embedded in this to generate that craving, right? Because a probably stronger craving was, I just want to sit on the couch, right? A probably stronger craving was, I don't want to do anything right now. But if we could continue to revisit and reinforce why it was that she needed to get moving, why it was that she wanted to invest in her health in this way, then we could prompt a routine, right? And the reward for the first several weeks was really just, doing it, right? The reward on the other side was just basically, the reinforcement of this is something different that I haven't done before, and this is contributing to the goal. Another reward that probably could have been implemented there is something a little bit more incentivizing or satisfying, right? So maybe if there wasn't like an immediate output reward of like, I feel good, because I think initially it wasn't comfortable for her, it could have been like a monetary reward for herself, right? Or I don't know, like at the end of the week, if I do all 5 days of what I've lined up for myself in relation to the goal or the habit that I'm trying to build, I can go buy a smoothie at my favorite smoothie place, right? Like whatever it is. It's all going to be very specific. But it was about that reinforcement, and that's a big part of this process. And I really see it a lot with exercise, because when it comes to exercise, it's really just about building consistency in movement and then being able to expand on that once the habit is there, right? Once there's a habit in place, we can start to get creative about what we're doing, how we're shaping it, the duration of it, right? But first and foremost, we just need to reinforce and allow that person to find their own reward in the midst of it, to find that incentive, right? To find a rhythm that works in their routine in and of itself, right? That takes time. And then from there, we can expand on it. I think similarly, when it comes to more healthful eating, right? I did reference like a lot of comfort food, a lot of comfort eating, stress eating that's there. But, really looking at your nutritional habits from the lens of this framework, like what is the cue that's creating this routine, right? What is the cue that's generating this habit? And then how can we replace that routine with something that's a little bit more nourishing, right? I think a good example here is clients who have a hard time with dessert or going out to eat and always needing to have dessert because that's habitual, because that's, what we do as a family, right? Like there's nostalgia embedded in that. I mean, the list goes on and on. And that's why I want to rattle off all these examples, but I really want you to look closer at your own habits in relation to this. Same with sleep, right? And wellness relates to sleep or sleep hygiene. It's kind of like getting into bed. Is it immediate that you reach for your phone and start to scroll, right? I think that, that's very common. Like the cue is just getting comfortable in bed or turning off the lights, right? And the cue and the craving is, I love how this feels, like that dopamine to scroll, whether it's TikTok, social media, like whatever it is that you choose to scroll. And the reward is entertainment. The reward is feeling good. The reward is whatever you feel rewarded by when doing this. But we know that's a detriment to our sleep, right? We know that blue light exposure is detrimental to our sleep quality. Okay, so how could we then replace it, right? And it's about experimenting with rewards. And I would argue, okay, the reward of scrolling, right? The reward of, what happens when we just scroll through of like feeling good or the dopamine or we laugh or whatever it is, right? If we input something else there that might bring us that same reward, great. But we also get the added reward of getting better quality sleep, right? And that in and of itself, I think helps to motivate, as much as I'm tempted to reach for my phone right now to scroll, which I'm guilty of this too. I'm not going to say like, oh, I've completely eradicated this, right? I'm never doom scrolling ever. Like obviously I am, right? And I'm working on that. That's always something I work on. But it's about choosing an alternate routine to generate that same reward, okay? And then, like I said, the added reward is better quality sleep. I don't think I finished my statement there. I think I was trying to say something else, and then I got sidetracked about my own doom scrolling. It'll come back to me. But anyways, right? So you really want to look at it through this lens. Okay, I'm going to read the statement that I said before again, just because now that we've kind of come full circle to some extent, I think it'll be really helpful to kind of really drive the point home. So, if a behavior is insufficient in any of the 4 stages, it will not become a habit. Eliminate the cue, right, and your habit will never start. If you don't have a cue that's prompting the behavior, whether it's a healthful or maybe not so healthful behavior, the cue will never start, right? And that, I think, personally, I would argue, is maybe an effective way to eliminate a habit if you don't want to engage in it, right? But I think that you're better off, and this could be a whole nother perspective, right? As opposed to eliminating the cue. Like, say, for example, you get off the phone with your mother-in-law. I know this is just an example. And you immediately are like, I need a glass of wine. All right, I'm just going to use this example. I don't want to bring too much of these like more maladaptive coping concepts into this conversation because I feel like this can be borderline like addictive topics, and I just don't want to enter that territory because that's a whole different ball game. But let's just say like you get off, let's not use that example. Let's use a different example. I get off the phone and immediately I want something sweet. I want something sugary, right? Because I'm just like stressed out. She stresses me out. by the way, I don't have a mother-in-law, okay? So I'm not speaking about anyone in particular, just using this example. That's the cue, right? Maybe the cue is an emotion, but let's use this example. The cue is your mother-in-law and her nagging or her, whatever she's saying, right? You can't just get rid of your mother-in-law. Like, you can't just not have your mother-in-law in your life, right? And that's what this is kind of suggesting, right? Eliminate the cue and your habit will never start. That's not to say you're not going to also feel anger, frustration, whatever, anxiety in another situation that's going to prompt that response, right? But kind of this concept of like eliminating the cue, you can't just avoid your mother-in-law forever, right? That's not possible. In some cases, maybe it is. Maybe the cue is like really specific. Like, my boss, this particular person that I work with, I can't stand. So let me just quit my job and move on. But I think what would be most effective is learning how to deal with that emotion or learn how to deal with that cue with a more healthful behavior, right? And then in any other instance that you're triggered or you feel like this cue is present, you're able to handle it more effectively. Okay? I don't really know if that makes a whole bunch of sense. I think it does, but just want to kind of call out that statement too, because I think it's like eliminate the cue. Okay, that could be effective in some situations so that the cue is just no longer there, but is it always effective? Is it always foolproof? Maybe not so much. Reduce the craving and you won't experience enough motivation to act. And that's so specific to you, right? Like, it has to be specific to you. I know for me, if I were to walk down the street, and this is just from my personal experience of really kind of monitoring my relationship with refined sugar and knowing what sugar does to my body, if I were to smell a donut, and this is not, I'm not trying to say that this is, I don't know, like this is just the example I'm thinking of, but I think that, this is just relevant to what we just talked about. If I were to walk down the street and I smell a donut, yeah, okay, donuts smell great, don't get me wrong, but I know how it's going to make me feel on the other side of it, and I just don't really care for it. So the craving of, I want a donut, it's not that intense for me, right? It's not that strong. And I think what has helped me, right, is not engaging in having a donut and then feeling good on the other side of that versus having the donut and feeling not so good on the other side of that, and that no longer makes me want the donut. Okay, it's kind of like a reverse approach to things. It's like a negative reinforcement type of mentality. Okay? So reduce the craving and you won't experience enough motivation to act. I don't have enough motivation to act on that donut because the craving itself is not that strong, right? Like I don't want it enough. Maybe for others that might be different, right? And that's okay. But it's just about bringing awareness to it. That's what matters, okay? Make the behavior difficult and you won't be able to do it. Okay, this is back to what I just said, laws of behavior change. Make it easy. If your gym is 45 minutes out of the way, what are you doing? Okay? Maybe once a month or go to this like event that they have or whatever the case is, but to make it like a regular daily or every other day thing, it's just not realistic. Okay? And if the reward fails to satisfy your desire, if the reward fails to satisfy your craving, then you'll have no reason to do it again in the future. Right? For example, the donut. My craving, that smells good, right? Like, that smells really good. I'm going to go get a donut. The routine, go get the donut. The reward on the other side. It tasted good, but I don't feel good now, right? That tasted good, but like it was like a split second of enjoyment and now I don't feel well, right? That reward is not strong enough to reinforce the craving. And over time, sometimes we have to learn our lessons, right? It's kind of like, I always eat this food or whatever. I think about like getting Chinese food, okay? Like the craving for Chinese food. The thought is there, like, okay, Chinese food. Do I feel good after having Chinese food? No, I don't feel good. I can't say that many people do. If you feel good after eating Chinese food, congratulations, because I don't know. I just never feel good. Right? I think it's just like all the oils that they use and whatever the heck they have in there, right? But I still have not, it's not like I'm having Chinese food often, but when I do, I haven't learned my lesson enough versus I got food poisoning from Chinese food and that was enough to quiet my craving because now I'm staying away from it. Okay. So you see what I mean? It's kind of like, is the degree of the reward strong enough to really bring you back for more, to satisfy that craving? And if not, you might have to readjust. Okay. Without the first 3 steps, a behavior will not occur. Without all 4, a behavior will not be repeated. In summary, the cue triggers a craving, which motivates a response, which provides a reward, which satisfies the craving, and ultimately becomes associated with the cue. Okay? So, this is big, right? This is big. This is pivotal, right? It's essential to understanding your health and your wellness to look at your lifestyle and your daily routines and how they're serving you, right? And how you can make a change, how you can adjust what you're doing in order to be more productive towards your health goals, to be more productive towards your wellness, mental and physical, right? And unfortunately, I think in some cases, which is a really hard pill to swallow for some, is the payout for some healthful habits isn't always immediate. I mean, they always say, like, your health is an investment, and the payout really comes with the long-term, vitality that comes with taking care of your body, 20s, 30s, 40s, right? What you feel and how you live in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. But that's not to say you can't also feel good now, right? Like, there's a lot of things that we can do on a daily basis that, really do make a difference in how we feel from day to day. I have a free training on this. I'll link it in the show notes. I think I typically link it. It's daily habits to support your habits. Oh my goodness. 5 pillars to support your daily Good Lord. 5 pillars to support your daily wellness. How to up-level your baseline. Okay? So go check that out because I talk about some habits that are really helpful to support your health on a day-to-day basis that bring you benefit in the immediate term, okay? But that's what I want you to remember because that requires you then to really, identify the reward, identify that craving, which is your why, and know that it's not always going to be like an immediate outcome or an immediate output that's going to drive your better quality habits, right? It's not like you work out once and you lose 30 pounds. No, you have to invest. You have to, commit to it and develop consistency with it. But it's through those micro habits. So it's about you deciding, okay, how am I going to create this habit loop to reinforce this better behavior, to reinforce my strength training, to reinforce my walking, my cardio, my eating habits, whatever the case is. How can I tailor them to be most reinforcing for me so I stick to them, which then will contribute to that long-term goal? Okay? So, lots to think about here. All right? And I think what I would suggest and what I would encourage you to do is take some notes. Should have said that in the beginning. Take some notes. Look at the behavior breakdown, the laws of behavior change. Take a look at the 3-step habit loop. And then look at your day-to-day. Start to cue in, right? Put your daily habits under a microscope and look at them. Where are the areas that you struggle? What is keeping you from getting to the gym? What is keeping you from riding your Peloton? What is keeping you from meal prepping? What is keeping you from eating more healthfully? What is keeping you from getting to bed at 9 as opposed to 11:30? What is keeping you? And then what are you going to do about it now that you have this framework, now that you have this habit loop, this understanding of how things are broken down, for you to then look at that, look at the sequence of events that are happening, and then make a change within that. Okay? That is my suggestion for you. And be patient with the process as usual, right? You want to be sure that you're honoring the fact that it does take time and, it can take a little bit of, introspection to understand like how is this habit serving me? How is this habit, becoming so habitual for me essentially, right? Like what is this habit bringing to me? What is the reward? What am I craving here? And how can I replace that instead? Right? How can I replace that with something different? And then also revisit, like I said, the 4 laws of behavior change. I will link some resources in the show notes. James Clear, wonderful, wonderful resource. He sends out a newsletter every Thursday, which I am a subscriber to. So definitely check that out. That's like a good reminder, and it's more info for you to kind of learn a little bit more, enrich your understanding. Maybe it's some new info that you didn't know before. But James Clear, Atomic Habits, great option. And then I will also link the book. I think it's I don't know why I'm blanking on this right now, so I apologize because I had the information and then it's escaping me. But it's another very well-known, my book is not behind me, it's elsewhere. Very well-known habit book about building a habit. Okay, a little more dense than Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits is such an easy read, but this one is a good one as well. And really, explains and dives into the science of it all, which is so fascinating because once we have authority over understanding the science, we can do so much with it. Okay, so thank you everyone for tuning in to today's episode. I hope that it brought you value. I really wanted to be sure I explained the breakdown of habit development and, each stage of that loop, and then also kind of pull in some more wellness, related and wellness-esque examples and, just concepts that might be relevant to you along your journey. I know for me, like, this has been something that's just been like omnipresent for me, like while I've navigated my journey. And it's just really fascinating because I think you can really learn a lot about yourself and really make a huge change in your life when you start to look at things through this lens, right? When you break it down and really look, okay, like what is so inhibitory towards my goal? Why am I getting so distracted? Why can't I seem to achieve X? Why can't I do this, that, and the other thing, right? This will really help you better understand yourself and the habits that you are engaging in. Okay, so once again, thank you for being here. I appreciate you all. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I look forward to welcoming you to my table again soon. In the meantime, be well.